Hey, greetings everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and as you may see from my dress, I am actually heading to New York for about 6 hours before Labor Day, when I'm back for good. But so much going on in the headlines right now, and some of which my comments have clearly elicited a fair amount of back and forth. So I thought I would let everybody know where I stand. First, kind of interesting point, this whole Colin Kaepernick flap, the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers, who decided that because there was very poor treatment of blacks, particularly vis-a-vis police in the U.S., that he's not going to stand for the national anthem. Frankly, a stance that I wasn't particularly supportive of. And it amused me, or bemused me, to see how many people said, "How dare you, Ian? We thought we liked you. We thought you were on our side on things like Trump and on immigration, and then all of a sudden you go after Kaepernick." Well, I mean, first of all, if I have shown anyone anything, it's that I'm not a left versus right wing guy, and I actually think about individual issues before I make a comment on them. I'm perfectly supportive of the idea that there's a fair amount of racism in the United States, and indeed that the Trump candidacy for the presidency is allowing that minority stance to become much more publicly acceptable. I'll get to that in a second. But the idea of refusing to stand for the national anthem, I certainly applaud the fact that every American has a right to do so, and shouldn't affect your ability to have gainful employment and all the rest. But I have a right to tell you I don't like it, and fans have a right to say to boo. And in my case, I don't like it because I think that it broad brushes what is a minority view in the United States, and a very hard thought minority view. We've finally gotten to the point that most Americans aren't racist. We've finally gotten to the point that most Americans have no problem with the idea that blacks vote, that they get educated, that they're fully integrated, that they work alongside, that they have every right to do everything, including hold the highest office in the land. And not every American feels that way, and not every American is comfortable with it, but it is a value that this country stands for. And I think to refuse to stand for the national anthem, sort of implies that the country as a whole has turned its back on this issue, and I don't see that at all. I still see America as a country where immigrants do better. I still see a country as a place where our values actually matter. And so, as a consequence, I wasn't particularly pleased with the idea that he was going to sit. I'm also become less of a fan of football over the years, I have to say. The corruption of it. I've been, of course, a New England Patriots fan pretty much since I can remember, and have been to games, and Steve Grogan and all of those guys when I was a kid in the 70s and 80s. I had the trading cards. But, I mean, after Tom Brady Deflategate, where it was pretty clear that he was lying to everyone and the team was covering up for him, made it harder for me to get all excited about football. And so, I mean, the fact that let's face it, if it had been a serious player from the Boston Red Sox, I still would have said what I said, but I would have felt more conflicted about it. Where for a San Francisco quarterback, who I don't really care about, it's easier. Anyway, that's that. Now, go Pats, yes, said. I'm glad you feel that way, but more go Red Sox. That's my view. So anyway, that's enough for me on Kaepernick. I'm not planning on talking more about it, but it is my perspective, and I suspect that of a lot of other fans. I'm not surprised at all that Trump ended up saying that he should go to another country. That, of course, is the antithesis of my view. He should stay in his own country, which is this one, and he should say whatever the hell he wants, and he should keep playing as well as he can, and he should get paid a lot for it. But the fans can let him know how they feel, and I suspect they will, and loudly. Trump, on the other hand, is going to Mexico today, which is also bemuses me. Going to be meeting with the Mexican president before he gives this landmark speech on immigration, which I am sure will be equally inconsistent with earlier statements of policies than just about everything else he said. Everyone that's followed me over the last few months knows that I'm about as close to never Trump as anyone could be. There is a presumption that that means that I'm in the tank for Hillary. Let me be very clear. I'm not. I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm disheartened by the idea that Hillary Clinton is the best we can do, that the former First Lady, who has been incredibly well connected as establishment as you could possibly imagine, and almost 70 years old, is the best we can do. Yes, is she capable? Of course she's capable. But is she an incredibly flawed candidate, particularly in an election where a large percentage of the United States population believes that we need something different? We need to get away from establishment Washington. Yes, she's an incredibly flawed candidate for that reason, and I'm not at all certain that I'm going to vote for. But I want to be very clear. There's a very big difference between the corruption of the Clinton Foundation, the lying and covering up of the emails and the rest. We've had President Bill Clinton before for a couple terms, and the American people dealt with it. It's just more of the same. We have lots of establishment candidates. They're disappointing. They're competent, and they allow for continued sort of structural malaise for a working and middle class that continues to get hollowed out. Am I happy about that? No. Am I willing to tolerate it? If there's no better choice, I guess I'll get behind it. But let's be clear, I might vote for a third-party candidate. What I will not do is support someone like Donald Trump, who I believe actually will tear a lot of the fabric of the country apart. His willingness to invoke racism, his willingness to invoke anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Latino sentiment, anti-disabled person sentiment in a country where it's been so difficult to actually achieve rights for all of these groups, in a country that has been a beacon for other countries around the world. We've made huge mistakes internationally. We've made huge mistakes internationally, sure, but the United States as superpower has been vastly better for the world than just about anyone else you can think of that has been in that position historically. And as the U.S. leaves that position, as it increasingly will, we're going to see a lot of challenges in what I call a G0 world. I find it inconceivable that I, as a foreign policy specialist, could possibly get behind a leader who is literally opposed as strongly as possible by every American ally around the world. Someone who they are convinced will help to dismantle the U.S.-led order. I am very concerned about someone whose chief supporters internationally of Vladimir Putin, Kim Jong-un, Nigel Farage, Marine Le Pen. Those people do reflect some very different reasons why they would support Trump. In some cases, it's because they want America to be weaker and less relevant on the global stage, Kim Jong-un and Putin. In some cases, because he reflects a much more jingoistic, xenophobic perspective of the United States, which they like for their own countries, Farage, Le Pen, Viktor Orban in Hungary. But how could you possibly get behind that? The very fact that Trump is the Republican nominee and we have to deal with him and the detritus that has come as a consequence for the next 2.5 months is already damaging to America's influence around the world. And again, I'll do everything possible to oppose him. I don't think that is in any way inconsistent with owning the world's largest political risk consultancy. I think it's more consistent with being a human being. I'm not going to tell people to get behind Hillary. I don't really care who you vote for. Vote for Green, vote for Johnson. Write yourself in. Don't show up. Vote for Hillary. Do whatever you want. Just do not vote for Trump. And I will absolutely use this page and every bit of influence I have to ensure that he does not get elected. I'm very sad that he's going to have a lot more influence after this election than he did before it. I think it's exactly the antithesis of what the United States should be. It's precisely the reason why you'll see more Kaepernicks going forward given the nature of Trump sitting out the national anthem, sitting out a lot of things, and it's not the country that my forebears came to Ellis Island to be a part of. But that's not the country that we really have. The country we really have is made up with a lot more people that think a lot more like me across the entire political spectrum than they think like Trump. And as a consequence, I still feel quite strongly that he's not only going to lose, but lose badly. It is not over, and he does have a shot, but we'll see where we are in November. Until then, I'm going to continue to irritate people on these issues. Anyway, I got to get off to New York right now, and I'll be back in Nantucket for just a few more days. Hope the weather's glorious and people are enjoying the last few days of summer before Labor Day. Take it easy.